Since President Trump's re-election, U.S.-Canada trade relations have hit a red line, especially after the U.S. doubled tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum to 50%. Once measured, Canada is now signaling it's ready to retaliate. With the G7 summit unfolding in Alberta, Prime Minister Mark Carney and Trump are on a collision course. But this isn't just a headline feud, it's an economic fault line. From diplomacy to disruption, here are the key flashpoints steering this high-stakes trade standoff into uncharted territory. Tensions ignite. Canada shifts gears at the G7. Tensions hit critical mass just ahead of the G7 summit in Alberta from June 15 to 17, 2025, where Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney made his debut. Determined to defend Canada's industrial backbone, Carney called out the U.S. for sharply increasing tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum, key pillars of Canada's export economy. The clash echoes back to 2018, when President Trump refused to co-sign the G7 communique over similar tariff tensions. Fast forward to 2025, and that friction has resurfaced amid global talks on climate AI and resilient supply chains, but now the stakes are even higher. Canada initially responded with caution, reciprocal tariffs, behind-the-scenes diplomacy, and a patient tone. But Trump's Commerce Department blindsided Canadian businesses by extending the 50% tariff to include derivative metal products. Trade Minister Dominic LeBlanc issued a pointed warning. Canada's patience is wearing thin. As Carney steps into the global spotlight, Ottawa is signaling that enough is enough. This isn't just about trade, it's about sovereignty, industrial survival, and standing firm on the world stage. Canada is done waiting and the world is watching. And as the pressure mounts in Alberta, the economic shockwaves were already being felt across supply chains. A policy whiplash, tariff spike sends shockwaves. So early June brought a jolt few saw coming. President Trump, flanked by steelworkers in Pittsburgh, announced the abrupt tariff hike, doubling duties on Canadian steel and aluminum with immediate effect. The justification bringing jobs back. The fallout, a chaotic scramble across both borders. Canada, which ships over 6 million metric tons of steel and 3.4 million metric tons of aluminum annually to the U.S., watched as $17.7 billion U.S. worth of metal trade hit a policy wall. There was no transition period, no buffer, just cold, hard duty hikes. For OEMs and Tier 1 suppliers relying on Canadian inputs, it was like slamming on the brakes mid-sea corner. Economists like Duke University's Felix Tintelnot flagged the obvious. This kind of sudden policy swing deters long-term investment. Who's going to upgrade equipment or expand output when the rules can flip on a tweet? Automakers, construction firms, even defense suppliers in the U.S. are feeling the heat, literally and figuratively, as materials get pricier and procurement pipelines jam. Trump may have scored rhetorical points with a Buy American soundbite, but under the hood, this move risks backfiring into inflation territory. For every steel worker smiling in Pennsylvania, there's an assembly line pausing in Detroit. Not exactly a balanced torque curve. Before we dive deeper, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Let's keep rolling. With that ripple echoing through North American industries, Canada's strategic response is more important than ever. Ottawa's response, strategic yet steely. Canada's counter hasn't been all fire and brimstone. In fact, it's been more torque wrench than sledgehammer. Trade Minister LeBlanc emphasized that talks with U.S. counterparts remain frequent and constructive, but also signaled that Canada's goodwill isn't bottomless. Rather than lashing out with knee-jerk retaliation, Canada has paused, measured, and set its sights on the G7's diplomatic runway. The signal to Washington, lift the tariffs, or we lift the diplomatic gloves. LeBlanc's message to Parliament hit the right RPM. We're committed to resolution, but not at the cost of our economic sovereignty. The strategy is two-pronged. Demonstrate resolve without torpedoing broader cooperation. Canada's message is that it's not afraid of confrontation, but it prefers solutions rooted in logic and mutual benefit. LeBlanc even emphasized that antagonism for its own sake rarely delivers policy wins. Instead, Canada is banking on the strength of shared economic interdependence to bring Washington back to the table. Still, the implication is clear. Should talks stall or worsen, Canada is fully prepared to fine-tune its trade countermeasures and protect its industrial engine. This isn't about flexing for political optics. It's about survival in a climate of unpredictability. And those inland engines are exactly what's at risk. Because when trade policy fails, it's not just headlines, it's production lines. Cross-border industry bound together, torn apart. When you pop the hood on this U.S.-Canada dispute, what you really see isn't just policy friction. It's industrial interdependence in distress. Canadian steel and aluminum exports surged 35% since 2018, revealing how tightly North American manufacturing is welded together. In Quebec, hydro-powered smelters crank out cleaner aluminum for American factories focused on sustainable builds. It's not just business, it's backbone. But here's the kicker. Tariffs don't just slow trade, they short-circuit vital systems. The U.S. military, infrastructure upgrades, and emergency rebuilds all depend on Canadian metal. Slapping a 50% tariff on that isn't just a speed bump. It's like cutting the brake lines mid-turn. Meanwhile, Canadian mills are bracing for layoffs, and the shockwaves hit everything from local economies to long-term export viability. Global markets aren't blind to this rift either. Allies like the EU, UK, and Australia are eyeing July 14th as a potential deadline for countermeasures if no resolution emerges. What started as a bilateral tiff may soon send tremors across the global supply grid. If sourcing shifts become permanent, trust built over decades of free trade pacts may be the real casualty that makes the G7 not just a summit, it's a potential steering wheel for global trade. The G7 summit redefining the road ahead. Alberta isn't just the G7 host this year, it's the main stage for a trade philosophy showdown. As Carney welcomes leaders like Macron, Starmer, and Modi, the summit agenda covers everything from AI ethics to green energy and global supply resilience. But center stage, the question of whether rule-based trade can survive the weight of unilateral economic muscles. Trump may once again opt out of a shared communiqué, sticking to the script that no deal is better than a bad deal. But Carney's message resonates like a tuned exhaust. Loud, precise, and clear. Trade stability isn't just nice to have, it's critical. For Canada, the moment isn't about retaliation, it's about preserving the blueprint for equitable, sustainable commerce. One wild card, security cooperation. Canada's foreign ministry has flagged that economic penalties can sour defense relationships, an overlooked cost that could backfire in a world full of complex threats. As the G7 unfolds, the choice becomes binary. Circle the wagons and guard individual interests or shift gears toward a reimagined alliance built for long-term durability. With the summit drawing to a close, what comes next could reshape the continent's economic trajectory. Final lap, a continental crossroads. This isn't just a tariff scuffle, it's a trade tipping point. Canada isn't playing hardball for headlines. It's protecting an industrial lifeline. Its environmental advantages and export precision deserve fair access. The U.S., on the other hand, must weigh short-term domestic boosts against ripple effects, like inflation, broken alliances, and stalled production. Whether you drive a pickup built in Windsor or a Mustang assembled in Flat Rock, this moment matters. What's at stake is more than just metal. It's the very engine of North American cooperation. Will diplomacy steer this relationship back on course? Are these tariffs tactical power plays or self-inflicted wounds on both economies? Should countries prioritize domestic industry protection at the cost of decades-old alliances? Let us know your take in the comments below. Whether you're wrenching in your garage, tracking the latest G7 headlines, or just love watching trade drama unfold under the hood. And don't forget, subscribe. You can now check out any of the videos on the screen. There's plenty more to explore.